This video is sponsored by Launch Tabletop, a full-scale board game manufacturer with a print-on-demand prototyping service, Launch Lab. Hang on until the end of the video for more information and a discount code. Hi, and we're back again to discuss 10 more lessons that I've learned about the board game industry over the 10 years or so that I've been making games. And since I made those first two videos, I've seen a number of videos on a similar sort of topic from other channels, starting with Pam Wallace Board Game Design channel on YouTube, which is a great channel, and that then got shared by Jamie Stegmaier, who shared some of his lessons that he's learned about board game design. And then I saw Tony Boydell write a post on it in his blog on Board Game Geek website, followed by Matthew Dunstan, who does live streams about board game design on his channel. So I'm a little bit late to the party with all of this, but all of them, they've done like 10 or 6, or I'm doing 100, so hopefully I've still got some value to add to this conversation, even though I'm a little bit late along the way. And today we're looking at numbers 80 through to number 71. And what I've done is I've got a bunch of cards which all have different different lessons that I've learned, different truths about the board game industry written on them. And we're not going through them in any particular order. I'm just basically shuffling them up, and then I'm going to reveal these cards, place them in these holders here, and talk to you about each one and give you a little bit of my wisdom that I've picked up over the years. So although I haven't yet chosen which things I'm going to talk to you about by the magic of video editing on the side of the screen now, you can see a little teaser to some of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. So here is card number 1. Home-crafted prototypes are fine, but they are time-consuming. And I think this is a really interesting little dilemma for board game designers. Creating your own prototypes by hand, cutting up cardboard, printing things out on your printer, finding components in craft shops. I've go to knitting shops and buy buttons and beads and all sorts. Anything I can find that's cheap, that could be a game component, I gather it up and I store it away. I go on Amazon, on eBay, and I purchase little, cheap little counters and tiddlywinks and all the rest of it, little wooden cubes. Really fun and exciting to put this stuff together, but it is very time consuming. And it can get quite expensive as well. One alternative is to go down the professional route and use a print-on-demand service. For example, my sponsor for this channel over the last few months has been Launch Tabletop, who have a print-on-demand service called Launch Lab. And using that service, yes, there's a cost to it, right? I'm paying probably a bit more to make my prototypes that way than I would be making them by hand. But it saves me so much time, because when I'm going to, pitch prototypes, pitch games at Essen Spiel, for example, at UK Games Expo, I might need 5, 6, 7 prototypes, maybe even more. And that is going to take me weeks and weeks to make. It's going to take up all of my spare time. If you can afford it, going with a professional manufacturer to make your prototypes means that you end up with something that looks fantastic, that presents your game in the best possible light. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but you've saved all that time, and you can produce multiple copies at no extra time at all. And in fact, the cost goes down. So if I'm producing 7 to 8 prototypes, they're much cheaper per prototype than they would be if I was producing 1 or 2, and it's taken me no extra time at all. So I'm shifting much more in that direction. I guess as my time gets squeezed, as I get more and more responsibilities in my day job, my non-game design job, responsibilities to my family and so on. So either way is fine. Either way is fine. And I have broken down the costs of producing card games to show there's actually minimal difference in it in a video about optimal card sizes and materials that you might use, choices between different card stock and things like that. Go and watch that video if you want to know a little bit about the costings, but I would recommend at least trying, seeing how you go with it. A print-on-demand service, Launch Lab is a really good one, and you get a 20% discount if you use the code Adam in Wales, all one word, capital letters. Show your game to multiple publishers at the same time. This is quite a common question that designers ask, new designers particularly. Should I just show it to one person? A publisher's going to be upset if I show it to multiple people. And I think when I first got into the industry, I met a professional designer who had a number of games, and he was very strict on he shows his games to one publisher each time. And he waits for the response because he doesn't want to get into situations of conflict or anything like that. And as a result, he doesn't have that many games that come out. They come out very, very slowly, every couple of years. And actually, you know, everybody else that I knew in the industry who was just starting out was they've kind of overtaken him, you know, in terms of, not that it's a race, you know, but they're producing multiple games each year and at a much quicker rate. And it's because they're showing their games to multiple publishers. They're not waiting the whole time. I absolutely make the most of my trips to conventions. If I can get to Essenspiel and I can show my game to, you know, at Essenspiel I might have 30 meetings over 4 days. They won't all be for the same game, but each game maybe I'm showing it to 10 or 15 different publishers. That's a great opportunity not to be missed. Why spend all that money on going to a convention and then waste it by not meeting as many people as possible? Now, it does get you into some slightly awkward situations where, you know, you might get a publisher who's asking for exclusivity, and I'm just quite honest with them really, and I'll say to them, I'm afraid I'm not able to offer that. This is the one opportunity I have in a year to show things to publishers, and for now, I'm afraid, you know, I am showing it to lots of people. And if that publisher doesn't like that, well then we'll have to go our separate ways. But the majority of publishers, the vast majority, know how it works. They know you're showing it to multiple people. They just want you to be honest and open about it. And so I try and keep publishers informed of how many people are looking at it, how many people are interested, how much time pressure there is for them to make a decision. I try not to manipulate anybody or play anyone off against anybody else or anything like that, but I do show my game to multiple people at the same time to maximize my time and my prospects of getting my games published. Make your values known to publishers. Okay, this is an interesting one, and it's probably not something that automatically occurs to you as a new designer. The fact that you might have different values to the publishers. Once you've signed it to a publisher, they have the right to do what they want with your game. They can put whatever artwork they want on it, they can usually retheme it, they can adjust some rules, they can change the name, they could really, potentially damage your reputation by making the game something you really wouldn't want it to be. For example, I would never want to design Cards Against Humanity. I understand people like it. I understand it's a very, very popular game. It's not my style. I would find it very awkward and difficult if I'd created a game like that and it was out there for people to see, right? It wouldn't reflect well on my day job. My outside game design job is quite a professional job. I'm a dentist. I want to be seen as respectable and, and family friendly and all the rest of it. So as a result, I would, if I pitched a party game to a publisher, they could change the words, right? They could make an After Dark edition and so on. When people are making artwork, are they going to include diversity in terms of the artwork that they produce? Are they going to put just men in there? Are the women all going to be in chainmail bikinis? Are we going to have different ethnicities in there? There's all sorts of things that you could do about diversity and inclusion, but don't assume that the publisher is going to be on the same page as you. So you need to have some of those conversations up front. For example, when Rob Fisher and I designed the game Compromat, I was quite clear with the publisher from day one, really, when we were talking about artwork. I want there to be equal representation of men and women in the game. The publisher was absolutely on board with that, and as a result, on the front cover, we've got a game about two spies competing against each other. One is a man, one is a woman, and that spreads throughout the cards that are in the game. It's a minor thing that nobody else notices, but it mattered to me, okay? So very early stages, let the publishers know what matters to you, okay? And that could be in terms of game mechanics, as well as in terms of theme and artwork. It could be about the name of the game, the style of the game. Do you want your game to be comical and silly? Do you want it to be serious and intellectual? All these things you need to let the publisher know so that you're not going off down different paths. Ask for more designer copies than you are offered. Okay, this was a bit of advice that I was given by a game designer who's made a good number of games, who I know reasonably well. And I can't remember how it came into the conversation, but he said he always looks at the contract, sees how many games they're offering, these free copies that they offer him as a designer, and then he asks them to double it, no matter what they put down. They offer 6, he asks for 12. They offer 12, he asks for 24. Now, of course, you've got to be careful, you've got to do it within reason. If you're talking big box, expensive games, and that's going to be hugely costly to the publisher, don't destroy your relationship over a few free designer copies, right? But some publishers, in their contract, it'll say that you get 3 copies or 6 copies. Frankly, it's not enough. I'm quite honest with publishers about, really, I need 12 or 15. That's kind of my minimum, really, because I like to give one to my parents, I like to give one to my brother, I like to give one to my sister, I like to give one to, a couple of key playtesters. I like to keep a few copies back so that in the future, if I ever wanted to develop the game, or even if just my copy wore out, I'd like to still have a copy available. I like to be able to give a copy to friends for their children for Christmas and this sort of thing. And yes, I could go out and buy copies, but actually these copies really, they don't cost very much to the publisher to produce. So if I can get a decent number, 12 to 15 for me, that's what I aim for, then that's fantastic. So if you don't ask, you don't get, okay? And if they say no, then okay, you've got a decision to make, and probably not a hill that I would want to die on in terms of saying to the publisher, well, that's it, I'm not signing a contract then. No, I'd probably go along with it anyway, but I do like to ask for more copies, and if I can't get free copies, then usually written into the contract, there's something which says that I can get them at cost price, which makes it a lot cheaper if I buy a bunch of extras. Get it out of your head and onto the table. One mistake that a lot of designers make is that they will spend days, weeks, months, years with a game idea floating around in their head, and it never gets beyond that. And the longer it remains in their head, the harder it is for them to get it out and actually start making it, because the idea starts to become corrupted. Other ideas start to creep in and they cross over, and some bits work together, other bits don't, and you can't remember which version it was you were working on, and you're running through all the playtests in your head, and problems are cropping up, and it's all limiting you, when actually just get it on the table and you'll find out what it is. You'll find out whether it's fun or not. You'll find out whether it's worth pursuing, and a lot of the things that you assumed about the game just won't be true. Doesn't matter what form you get it on the table, but get it on the table. Pen and paper, that's fine. Push a few counters around, tokens that you've gathered from other games, that's fine. Borrow them, fine, but get it on the table. It doesn't do anything while it's in your head. I've got a whole video about this, unleashing your inner board game designer. So go away and watch that one if you're having problems getting an idea out of your head and onto the table. Watching playtesters is more valuable than their verbal or written feedback. So this is probably a personal preference rather than something that I could say is universally true for all designers. But I must admit, playtesters' feedback, their verbal feedback, their written feedback, is of limited value to me. I don't really want playtesters to solve problems in my game, to fix my game. I feel like that's kind of my responsibility as the designer. Now, that might be a bit different if I deliberately do a playtest with other designers to ask for their help, ask for their solutions. But if I'm doing a playtest with gamers, where there's no expectation that they're going to solve my mechanical problems or anything like that, I just want to know what's fun and what isn't. Well, I get that information much more accurately by watching them and seeing what experience they have playing the game. Because once you get into verbal and written feedback, people are either overly polite or overly critical. And the common feedback is don't just play with friends and family, because they'll be polite. They won't tell you the truth. Whereas if you play with strangers, they'll tell you the truth. They'll tell you if your game's rubbish. Not in the UK, they won't. If you play with strangers, they'll be ever so polite and tell you your game's wonderful when it really isn't. Watch them. They might be telling you it's wonderful, but did they look like they were having fun? Were they laughing at the points where you expected them to be laughing? Did you provide the sort of experience that you intended? You get that through the eyes, right? Not through the ears. Watch them. Written feedback, verbal feedback can be useful, but it's secondary, okay? So I tend to sit back quietly. I might be playing the game even, but I'm watching what other people are doing. Your game doesn't just belong to you. This one's particularly sort of characterized for me by a recollection that I have of when Pikoko, my game Pikoko, won an award. It won Best Card Game at the UK Games Expo in, I don't know, 2018 or something like that. I think it was 2018. And there was a moment where, when we won that award, where there was an award ceremony, right? And you had to go up on the stage and collect your awards. And Martin Wallace was presenting the award for the one and only time I've met Martin Wallace, a sort of superstar designer. So it was all very exciting as a new designer in the industry. But of course I went up to collect the award. So did one of the founding sort of members of Brain Games, who published Pikoko. And then of course we've got this one award, this one physical thing, and someone's got to take that away. Like, I can either take it home with me and put it on my shelf, or the publisher can take it away and put it on their shelf. And it was immediately obvious to me that that should go to the publisher, right? In terms of like where that matters the most, the award, where it's going to have the most impact, it's for the publisher to be able to show, you know, this award followed all the awards that Ice Cool had won, like the previous year. The awards were really important to that publisher, and actually that publisher had really promoted the game with awards in mind. Around UK Games Expo, there were posters up saying, vote for us and this awards, which other publishers weren't necessarily doing. So they'd really pushed for that award in a really positive way. And it just really, sort of in a very sort of physical, practical way, characterized for me the fact that that game is not just mine, right? Pikoko, all sorts of people put a lot of love and care and attention into that game. Not least the artist. I mean, one of the biggest things that got Pikoko all the attention that it got was the physical appearance of it. Now, I have some, I have some responsibility for that. I came up with the concept of, the card holders and laying out the cards so they fan out like a peacock's feathers. But it was Rhinus who actually sort of illustrated those peacocks and made them look so sort of stunning and visually appealing as they did. So he takes some ownership of it. I did put a fair amount into it when I first designed it, but I have no doubt that the publisher put more into it. In fact, the process of publishing that game took a couple of years, of various stages of development, all done by the publisher without my real involvement. So we've got project managers in there, we've got developers in there, we've got artists in there, we've got the publishers overseeing the whole thing. And it matters to them just as much, if not more, than it matters to me. They're the ones carrying all the financial risk, all the practical risk in this project. So what I'm saying to you is, don't get into that mindset of this game is just mine. I always think about, if you design a novel, if you write a novel or something like that, then it's the author's name that's on that novel. And it feels very much like that's their novel. Like Harry Potter, that's J.K. Rowling's novel, right? It belongs to J.K. Rowling. That's how it feels. You don't really think about the publisher of the book. But a novel's a little bit different to a game, isn't it? Because every written word in that book is J.K. Rowling's. I suppose there are probably editors and things like that in there, but there's no illustrations in there. It's a book. Maybe there's an artist. I suppose there's an artist for the front cover and all of that. But largely that is J.K. Rowling's work. A board game's not quite like that. There's a lot of people feeding into this to make that finished product, and your idea alone was not enough. Otherwise you would have done it yourself. So there's a lot of people taking ownership of it. I think maybe perhaps it's a bit more like a movie where, yes, sometimes we think of a movie by the director. So we think of a Spielberg movie. So yes, that's largely owned by Spielberg, isn't it? But it's not always the case. It could be that it's a Warner Brothers movie and it's the movie, the studio that's taking a bit more ownership of it. Or we might talk about a Tom Cruise movie, right? Where really we're looking at the star who's at the centre of it. So I think board games are a bit more like that. There's lots of people who can take various amounts of ownership of these projects. So don't get too precious about it, is what I'm saying. There's lots of people who have skin in this game, and it's not all on you. Your game is ready when repeated tests require no adjustment. So this is a common question from designers. At what point is your game ready to show to publishers? At what point are you ready to pitch? And my answer would be, when you're playing it over and over again and you don't need to change anything, okay? I don't see I see the need for hundreds and hundreds of playtests. I see how that could create a fantastic, balanced, robust product, but we make no money. There's no money in this job. Why would you spend hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours on something that's going to make you no money? Okay, you've got a responsibility to look after yourself and your family and your playtesters, and consumers have the right to decide whether they choose to play your game, buy your game or not. But I think get your game to the point where you're happy that this is not changing. You got it to a point where actually repeatedly people are having a good time with it, and then we can pass it over to the publisher, and if they want to do hundreds and thousands of play tests, fantastic. They're doing the job that, where hopefully they are paid and they are reimbursed for that work. But I think as a designer, you just want to get it to the point where it's robust. At that point, it's ready to show to a publisher. You must have a clause to get your rights back. So I have the very first contract that I was offered, and thankfully I did turn it down for exactly this reason. It had no clause in it that would ever give me the rights back for my game. And that you could overlook that would be a major problem for you, because once you've signed it over to that publisher, it belongs to them, okay? Every contract that I've had since has got some sort of clause in there that says if the game does not sell this many copies in this time period, or we do not manufacture any copies, or it's not available for sale, or whatever, that the rights will revert back to me as the designer. And it's essential that you look at that clause and you look at it carefully. I remember speaking to a designer who had designed a game back in 1990, and I was looking at whether we could bring that game back, like together, maybe work together on it, because I love the game, right? Maybe we could work together on it. The original game had been marketed as a co-design, and the designer's telling me, well, it wasn't really a co-design, it was just one of the publishers' team who put their name on the box as a co-designer alongside me. So I was saying to him, well, who owns the rights? And he was saying, well, I'm not really sure, I think I do, but he couldn't, he had no contact for that other person. He had no way of getting in touch with that other designer or publisher. So ultimately, he can't really do anything with that game anymore because it's not clear who it belongs to. It needs to be very clear at what point you get it back. Okay, get that into your contract. Think very carefully about the implications of what's written there. If it says it's got to be available for sale, then what does that mean? It's just listed on their website, or do they have to actively pushing it? If it says that they're producing it, or the game is available on the market, does that include digital copies? Because that would be very cheap and easy for them to produce a digital copy for free for people to play and hold on to the rights. So you've got to be very careful about what's in that contract. That's one of the clauses I will always look at very closely in my contract before I sign it. Don't resist feedback, invite it. Right, so this is the whole purpose of playtesting, isn't it? Is to get feedback. And I feel like I've contradicted myself here by saying watching playtesters is more valuable than written or verbal feedback, and then saying don't resist feedback, invite it. So what I'm talking about here really is when people tell you something that you don't want to hear about your game, don't fight it. Listen, write it down, think about it, just consider they might be right, okay? They might not be. They might not be, but if you're so sure of your game, why are you playtesting at all? The whole purpose is to listen to other people. I mean, I remember once a designer bringing along an extremely complex, completely broken and, a game that was not working to our playtest group. And I gave extensive feedback, very kindly, very generously, I thought, very politely. But it was quite critical feedback because I thought there was a lot that needed to change. The designer wasn't particularly happy with the feedback. Another designer who was at our same playtest group went a little more gently again told him lots of real positives about his game, all the things that were really good about it. The designer, who had received all the feedback, was glowing in his praise. He even gave a gift to the other designer who'd given him the positive feedback, whereas me, who'd given him loads of valuable critical feedback, yeah, he wasn't that interested in, certainly didn't buy me any gifts. I don't do it for the gifts, that's not what it's all about. But don't resist it, right? Negative feedback is good, as long as it is given in a polite, respectful way. Listen to it. You don't have to take it all on board, but some of it might be stuff that you need to know. Okay, so that is the next 10. That was numbers 80 through to 71. And of course, we'll be continuing with the next 10 in the next video. So until then, all the best. Did you know that LaunchLab has both laser cut and professionally die cut boards for you to make custom shaped tokens and game boards? If you want a beautiful finish on your prototype components, log on to launchtabletop.com and use the code AdminWales for a 20% discount on your order.